As we know, the 18th century is the century which witnesses the rise of the middle class. Middle-class people were not interested in going to the theatre anymore because they preferred other forms of art, such as journalism and novel writing. They were basically interested in heroes, in new heroes, which were a kind of mirror of their condition. As a middle-class man, I want to see myself portrayed in the hero. Think of Robinson Crusoe and Moll Flanders, which have been created by Daniel Defoe, the father of modern novel. Both start from appalling conditions. Robinson suffers a shipwreck on a desert island. Moll Flanders is abandoned in London as she is a little child. Both end up becoming successful and rich because they are chosen by God. We have to think back of Martin Luther's theory of predestination. Middle-class people truly believed that a man, a woman, becomes successful if and only if he or she have been chosen by God, if he or she are a part of God's plan. Becoming rich, becoming successful is not something against the idea of salvation. Quite the opposite. It's a proof that you're gonna be saved once your life is over. Because you have been successful in life, you're gonna be saved in the afterlife. So it's an opposite view if you think of Christianity, of Catholicism, okay? So, Daniel Defoe is the father of English novel. We have to say something more about his novel writing. He had worked as a journalist till he was 60. So he spent all his life writing for newspapers and magazines. By the way, as it was cheaper to print magazines and newspapers, being a journalist had become a profession. Defoe is the first professional journalist. He worked, he made a living, he earned his money working as a journalist. He described terrible episodes in the history of London. He described the plague. He described the Great Fire of London. As a journalist, in a realistic, objective, matter-of-fact style. What was missing? What lacks in Defoe's novels? The psychological analysis. We will never find a character's feelings, a character's impressions in Defoe's novels. The first time we will find this some kind of full description of a character, even from a psychological point of view, we first find it with Samuel Richardson, who is the father of the epistolary and psychological novel. Why epistolary? Because as he lived in a village, in an English village, where most people were illiterate, they could not read and write, everybody asked him to read and write letters for them. So he had become so used to letter writing that it was natural for him to pretend that he had found a collection of letters between a young girl, Pamela Andrews, and her father. He pretended that these letters truly existed. It was a way of making the reader believe that what they are reading is true. The same thing had been done by Daniel Defoe, but from another point of view. Defoe created this suspension of disbelief, that is, he wanted his reader to stop not believing, so to start believing that what they are reading is true. We will find something very similar in Alessandro Manzoni. Il vero come oggetto, il vero, io direi il verosimile. Ok. Reading the letters between Pamela and her father, we find her feelings, her fear. Why fear? Because she worked for an old lady. She dies, so she lives with the lady's son, Mr. B. He tries to seduce her. She resists his advances. And finally, he falls in love with her. He marries her. And so once again, she becomes rich and successful. So once again, another person who had been chosen by God. Henry Fielding, the father of the anti-heroic novel, wrote a parody of Pamela, Shamela. What happens? Fielding wants to point out that Pamela was not a virtuous girl. She had only used the attraction that Mr. B felt for her to, we may say, to make herself married by him, because she wanted to become his wife from the very beginning. So she was only a calculating person. She was not virtuous. So the subtitle, Pamela or the Virtue Rewarded, has to be interpreted as a reward, not of true virtue, but of a strategy. So Fielding reverses the opinion we should have about Pamela, who becomes Shamela. She calculates everything according to what can be useful, but not for true virtue, but only for a strategy. So, as you can see, we already have three styles of novel writing. Objective style of novel writing, Defoe. Psychological epistolary style of writing, so psychological epistolary novel, anti-heroic novel with Fielding, and finally, for now, ironic satirical novel.